Hello, everyone, and welcome to NoCode North and the Northern Showcase. Thank you for spending your time with us. I'm Penny Olorenshaw, a Webflow developer from Trenton, Ontario, and I handle communications for NoCode North.
I'm Jeremy Leroux, a writer-director turned Webflow low-code developer from Vancouver. On the NoCode North team, I'm the resident automations expert and runner of streams.
Hey, I'm Maggie Monceau. I'm a Webflow developer based in Toronto with a background in film and television. And on NoCode North Group, I take care of our designs and our gather space.
Our mission at NoCode North is twofold. First, to build a community of Canadian Webflowers and no-code enthusiasts. And secondly, to showcase that Canadian talent to the rest of the world. We meet Fridays at noon Eastern in the Lodge, our gather space. And once a month, we host the Northern Showcase here on our YouTube channel.
So let's take a moment to say hi to folks in the chat. And I would have to actually have some chat up to do that. Hey, I see Dale. Hi, how are you? It's great to have you here. And Carrie, haven't connected with you for a while, but that's great to have you join us today. And I'm not sure anybody else who's watching right now, pop in the chat and say hi. And otherwise, if you're watching this in early December, join us at the NoCode North and Floxy's holiday party, which we're going to be co-hosting in the Lodge on December 16th at 12 Eastern. Follow us on Twitter for all the details. And I see some more folks popping in. Hi, Isabel. We haven't met yet, but I'm looking forward to getting to know you a bit more. And hey, Eric, you're here. Yay. And Rachel, we met recently at the NoCode North Watch party in Toronto. So it was excellent to have you all joining us today. If you have questions for Grace, just put them in the chat and we'll either get to them as we're going through the interview or at the end of the event, at the end of the interview. I seem to have all the chatting to do today. So on today's Northern Showcase, we have the absolute pleasure of welcoming Grace Walker. Based in Calgary, Alberta, Grace is an independent designer and Webflow expert, creating work that is visually stunning and creatively and technically sound. With a background in graphic design, she applies her skills to the web and works with a number of design and development agencies.
Please help us welcome Grace Walker. Hey, Grace.
Hey,
Hello.
Hey. Grace, I gotta say,
for having me.
yeah, it's wonderful to have you here. And I have to say how much I enjoyed getting to meet you when I was in Calgary in June. It was so lovely to have lunch together and chat about, you know, Webflow and life and things. So it's great to have you here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. Penny, you were the first person that I met from the Webflow community in real life, and I loved that we got to hang out in person. And now that I've met other folks at Webflow Conf and things like that, it's every time you meet someone who you have connected with online, it's just really special to connect in real life too, and virtually with spaces like this. So I really appreciate everything that you are all doing to build community, especially for Canadians.
Oh,
Excellent.
that's really nice.
Good.
Thank you.
So you're quite active on a number of social channels, but recently you posted a picture of the mountains. Tell us a little bit about why, you know, the mountains and who's here in this picture and what was going on.
Yeah, so this is a photo of me and my husband. I got married this summer, and when we were planning our wedding and thinking about how we were going to get married, we went back and forth on a few ideas, and one of them was, let's just get married by the side of the highway. We have been road cyclists for we've been together for 10 years. And I've been a road cyclist for that basically amount of time. Dan got me into cycling, and it's just been this like really central part of our relationship and who we are. So that was one of our ideas. My family didn't love that idea, so we ended up having a small wedding near our house, but our wedding photographer loved that we had thought of that, and she offered to do a session with us in the mountains. So we had some really nice photos of us riding that mean a lot to us, just because that's where we spend a lot of time. And Penny, I know that you're from Canmore. That shot is on the 1A, the Banff Parkway, or the Bow Valley Parkway from Banff to Lake Louise, at a spot called Moose Meadows. So that's like one of our favorite rides that we do from Banff to Lake Louise. And was just like really nice that we have photos of it.
That's great.
And that's pretty big contrast to the one you posted like yesterday. Going out for lunch in -18 or something.
Oh my goodness. It has been so cold recently. I saw someone in Vancouver had replied to that and they said, oh man, I thought that -3 was cold here. But I know like Toronto and Ontario can get like, it's just a different type of cold. It feels like wet and just like humid. I feel like it's almost worse than it is when it's really cold here in Alberta where it's more dry. But I feel like I start every new business call or like client meeting talking about the weather. And that's like such a Canadian thing, I feel like.
Yeah, it definitely is. Definitely.
Also, just a novelty for a lot of my American clients who live in warmer climates. And I'll tell them how cold it is here.
And I'm sure they just have no idea what that actually feels like. Yeah.
Oh, I actually grew up in the south of France, so coming here when I was 20, it was quite a shock to my system to see the first big snowfall. But yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I bet.
Goodness. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, shall we dive in? So first, I just wanted to talk a little bit. I've been, to prep for this interview, I've been listening to a few interviews of you online, and I was listening to the Emily Giordano one, and it seemed to me from that interview, what I was getting is that you're a little bit of an introvert. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I thought that was so interesting to see someone who's an introvert in real life, but then is so social on social media and so visible in our space. And I was going to ask you, how was it from your experience to go to a big conference like Webflow conference from the eyes of an introvert?
Yeah, well, thanks for listening to that interview. I would definitely, I think, classify myself as an introvert. I do like being social, and I feel like I enjoy it when I'm in it, but it is really draining. And I think that that's kind of a quality maybe of someone who is more introverted, is that you can do those things, but you just feel like incredibly drained afterwards.
Yeah.
So going to Webflow Conf, I feel like I met so many friends who I know online, and it was just a really wonderful feeling to be able to talk to everybody. But definitely after the first day, I just like wanted to go back to our hotel and lay down and not talk to anybody. I was there with my husband, and I was like, you can't talk to me for a little bit. Like, I just need to take a break. But frankly, by the end of the second day, I was like struggling to have conversations in general with people, trying to form thoughts together. I don't know if that was an introvert thing or more so just like a had been talking for the last 48 hours thing.
Did you have a lot of people come to you and try to talk to you, or?
Yeah, there was a lot of people who like were friends online, and I tried to find people that I knew, and I think a lot of people had come up to talk to me. So it was really, really nice to like have a lot of those conversations of people that like maybe you've interacted a few times on Twitter, and then you see them in real life, or like a lot of people I've grown close with. And so having those conversations was quite nice as well.
Yeah. We're a little bit jealous. We were hoping to go this year, like the three of us, but I think it's going to be next year. Big reunion at Webflow Conf next year.
Yeah, definitely. I know there was a lot of folks who wanted to be there and couldn't. And it seemed like the online experience was pretty good, but I'm hopeful that next year it'll be even bigger and more friends will come. And I think Mason Poe described it as more of a reunion than anything, of just like friends meeting who already know each other.
Next year.
Yeah.
So I want to go back in time a little bit and go through how you became who you are today. So your background is in design with a degree from OCAD in Toronto. Did you originally thought you'd be going more into print or editorial design?
Yeah, I think I did. Like so going to OCAD, I went into graphic design. There was options to go into advertising. I'm not an illustrator, so that was not an option. But I picked graphic design, and I think that was rooted a lot in a love for editorial and print. I don't know if I've told this story or not anywhere else, but I feel like there was a moment in high school where I kind of knew that I really wanted to be a graphic designer. I'd always loved art. That was something that I really, really enjoyed. But I didn't know that graphic design was even a career that you could have. And we had a university fair at our school. All of these universities from across Canada came, and they had their guidebooks and everything else. And the University of Toronto guidebook, I picked it up, and I didn't want to go to U of T, but their guidebook was just stunning. And it was just like the design of it, the layout. I was like, oh my gosh, somebody designed this, and that's a job, and that could be my job. And that was, I think about that moment a lot of realizing that, hey, like graphic design is a career. Somebody put time and effort into craft this thing, and that could be something that I do. And after that point, I started to get more into really looking at the editorial design of books and prints and that kind of thing. And I think that was really the root of why I chose graphic design. But as I got into the program, that kind of like started to shift in what I thought that I wanted to do.
Yeah, and it's such a good thing to have when doing web design anyways, to have that background and understand layouts through editorial and print design as well. I feel like it's so useful in our field.
Yeah, it comes into like a lot of things, I think. And honestly, most of my design degree was print stuff. That was kind of the focus of a lot of what we did, was either like book design or posters or physical objects, things like that. And so that comes a lot into, I don't know, I reference a lot of editorial design when I'm doing web stuff anyways.
Yeah. And so what led you to the decision to use the web as your main medium?
Oh gosh, I think part of it was when I was in school, I was starting to think about what kind of job could I get after I graduate. I've always been someone who is interested in design and the kind of business aspect of it, and also like the functional and productive aspects of design and how you can use design to shape experiences and things like that. I think there was a lot of designers in my program who were almost like on a fine art side, like really appreciated the more academic side of design. And that wasn't me. And so when I was starting to think about like what kind of job I can have as a designer, I started to realize that like UX and UI design was a really big part of the potential careers that I could have. At that point, there wasn't really a focus on any of that in my courses at OCAD. And so I knew that if I wanted to have that focus, I was going to have to drive it myself. There was one like web focused course that I did, but it was like more conceptual. And anyways, in my last year at OCAD, we had a thesis project where it was essentially self-directed for a year. And in that, I knew that if I wanted to do UI design or anything like that, this was my chance to do a self-directed project where that was a key component. And so my project that I did as part of my thesis was designing a platform to share ride routes, road cycling ride routes. And I designed the interface for it, and I built a prototype, and that kind of was, I forced myself to do a project like that. And that was kind of like the start of getting into web work.
So interesting. So what I wanted to get into as well is because you had a keynote at Webflow conference called Solopreneur Staying Small on Purpose, which was really interesting and very inspiring. And I personally would love to kind of go that route as well. And I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about your experience at your 2 previous jobs, and what led you to leave those and start your journey as a solopreneur.
Yeah, well, thanks for watching it and for the kind words about that. I think a lot of people resonated with that talk because a lot of the advice that's out there is that you need to grow a studio and grow a team and build and build and build. And for me, that's just like not been a desire, and I'm still have a successful career. So I really wanted to share that perspective. But yeah, so my previous jobs and kind of how that led me to being solo. My first job as a designer was while I was still a student. I was a summer student at the City of Calgary in their creative services department. And I was really lucky on the timing of that because I don't even know if that internship still exists. But I worked there for 2 summers, which was also really lucky to be able to be invited back for a second year. But the creative services department at the city essentially acts like an agency for the larger city corporation. So all of the different business division, from Parks and Recreation to road services and communications, and every department within the city will reach out to creative services when they need to have materials developed for them. So when I was a summer student, I worked on things like the menu at a city golf course or signs for rec centers or things like that. And seeing that environment, they were also going through a rebrand at the time, but it was just like, it was a very big, busy, creative environment, like very much like an agency, but a little bit more chill with account managers and communications department and designers and everything like that. So that was, I remember thinking at that job, actually, like, this is the nicest office I'll ever work in. Because it was in like a historic building, and it was just beautiful. But yeah, that was the biggest job I ever had in terms of like volume and number of people that I worked with. And it was actually a connection from that job. One of the designers that I worked with, her really good friend had a design studio and said, "Oh, you should meet my friend." I went back to visit while I was on a reading break at university, and I met with their team at the small studio that I worked at, and hit it off, and I loved what they were doing. And that led to my next job, which was right after I graduated from OCAD with my design degree. I worked at a small branding and communications studio, and I did that for 3 years. It was a team of 2 women that owned the studio, and they had been doing work, just the 2 of them, with like occasional contractors for 6 or 7 years. And then they brought me on as their first kind of contractor, not employee, but I was on contract for 4 days a week with them. And that was just like thrown in the deep end, doing so much different work because they were such a small team. When I was working at the city, I was just doing design work. Like, all the content was provided. Everything was very smooth. There was an account person. And working at this small studio, while we still had my account director, was very much touching everything. So being involved in brainstorms, being involved in client meetings, having critiques with my creative director, and just really seeing like fulsome processes from start to finish on like various size of projects. And that was like just an amazing experience. And I did that for 3 years and like absolutely loved it.
Yeah, that sounds like such a good opportunity. It's funny because a lot of freelancers that start on their own, especially if they started during a pandemic, don't necessarily never had that experience of going in and being exposed to so many different projects and layers of building a project as well. So yeah, and it just makes you it makes you a better a better developer, a better project manager, which, you know, because you're wearing a lot of those different hats.
Yeah. I think especially as a young designer, like, I don't know that I could have had a better post-school education than working at that studio. Like, it was such a positive environment, and also just somewhere where I learned so much, because what you learn in school is one thing, but like, I feel like I learned more than my degree in my first 6 months working as a designer with this studio. And yeah, to be able to see everything and understand processes and talk to clients and work with collaborators, that was a really, really special experience as a young designer, and really set a foundation for what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I bet. And so you left that studio, and could you tell us a little bit more about why you left, and yeah, a little bit about that decision?
Yeah, definitely. It was kind of around the 2.5-year mark where I was starting to think, you know, like, what's my next step? What do I want to be doing? And I started to, you know, start gathering my portfolio together to figure out, you know, like, should I take on freelance work? Do I want to look for something else? And then the pandemic hit. So I had actually planned a really big break, like a work break for myself. I was going to go to Utah for 3 weeks with my partner and just take some time off of design. And the border closed the week that we were going to leave for that. So it was a really unique time, because I had been rushing at work to finish a bunch of things for this break and then wasn't going. So I ended up taking some time off. And then obviously, like, as for I think every studio and agency in the world at that point in time, work really slowed down because the world was scared. And so there was just a really big slowdown in the work that I had at the studio. And I started to think about, like, how can I freelance and maybe supplement this a little bit? And so that was really kind of a pushing point for me, where I got my portfolio together. I started to be open to freelance opportunities, and was really lucky that a couple came my way, from just like industry connections and friends who knew that I was open to freelance work. And it was kind of like a combination of things. At that point as well, I had my 3-year review at the company that I was at, and we had some conversations about the future and what that looked like for me. And I was doing some freelance work at the time, and I had started to think about, you know, like, what does the future look like for me? What do I want to be doing? How can I also have an income that can support my future family? And so kind of all of those decisions together really kind of put the spark in my mind that maybe now is the time to try freelancing, to try working on my own. I had amazing examples around me directly of like 2 women who had their own business for 7 years. At that point, 10 years with me and other kind of contract employees. And I was really lucky to meet a lot of women in my city who either had their own practice, ran their own studio, or were working independently. My sister-in-law at the time was working independently. And so I had all these like seeds around me of women who were working on their own or had their own successful practice. And I thought, you know, like, I think I can do that too. And I decided to go full-time freelance in July of 2020. Yes, because 2023 will be 3 years for me. And it was just like in the deep end, trying to find work, trying to tell everyone that I knew that I was freelancing, and was really stressful for, honestly, it's like still stressful, but I think probably like the first year and a half was really just taking on everything that I possibly could, telling everyone that I knew that I was freelancing, and thankfully had like work come my way, and it worked out.
Yeah, and it's such it was such a weird time for our industry, because on one end, nobody was buying websites anymore because they were worried about what's going to happen with the economy. And on the other end, everything's moving online, so everybody needs a website all of a sudden. So I was wondering, like, how did the pandemic influence your business?
Yeah, well, I think like primarily it was the force that made me go freelance. Like I might be freelancing now, but it was really like the big push to say, if I'm going to do this, now is the time. There's kind of this natural break for me, and maybe I can do this on my own. I also think I started to think about, like, I knew when I went freelance, like, I have the skills to design a website. I have the skills to develop a website. I had been doing a lot of website design and development in that studio job for 3 years. And I was really confident in my skills to execute. But I just didn't know about the client aspect of things and like pricing and everything else. So yeah, I think that the pandemic was just like a push to start. And it was a really nice time to be doing that as well, because there was this kind of natural break for everyone, for agencies, for studios, for freelancers. Like everyone was kind of like fumbling a little bit and trying to figure things out. And so I was like, well, I'll just start now too. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that I found interesting during the pandemic is that a lot more people were online, and communities all of a sudden became even more active. Like I know for my own business, it's starting working better because I started becoming more active in the FinSuite community and getting a lot of advice from that community. And that has really, really influenced my business and made it more successful, I find.
Yeah. I think like I wasn't active. I was on Instagram for the first year that I was freelancing, but like didn't really have a lot of traction. I did get a few clients there, but really like, yeah, being active on FinSuite live streams, I think was the push that I needed to start being active on Twitter. Like I think that was the seed that was planted on the FinSuite live streams, because I tuned into those every week and I loved them. Mm-hmm. And they were talking about like the Twitter community, and I was like, oh, maybe I should see what that's about. And that was like transformative. Like I got on Twitter probably, I think it was like right at my first year freelance anniversary. And I wasn't active on there before that. And that just like totally transformed how I got clients and how I was interacting with community and the friends that I was making. And it just made me feel like a lot less alone in what I was doing.
Yeah, that would be a big advice for anyone who's starting as a freelancer in Webflow, is maybe get on Twitter, because it would help. Is there anything you miss from working at the studio and being part of a design team?
Yeah, I think I really miss the open critique. I think like I loved my creative director and I respect her so much. And she is one of the most talented people I've ever worked with. And being able to have open dialogue and conversation about design concepts and directions and things like that, I think that was probably the biggest thing that I missed. I've started to recreate that a little bit with online friends and scheduling critiques for myself with other people. But that studio environment was really unique. And I don't know, and I think probably a lot of other agencies had that environment, but now that they're remote, I'm really curious like how other people deal with critique and things like that remotely with a large team, because I just haven't experienced that as a solo person.
Yeah. So I want to get a little bit into like you've been extremely successful for the past few years, and I think a lot of freelancers really admire you and kind of like thrive to become the next Grace Walker maybe. And so there's a few here. We're gonna start with a question from Isabel in the crowd first. She was asking, how did you gain confidence with pricing? I still doubt myself every time I price a project for a client, and I feel like I'm underselling myself.
Yeah, pricing, I think, is something that a lot of people struggle with. And so this is not a unique concern, and it has been a concern of mine the entire time that I've been freelancing. Really, I think the biggest thing here is time. And that is sometimes a hard thing to accept or deal with, because you want to be charging more and feeling confident right away. And really for me, it was time. I think in my first year of freelancing, I was really, I had a lot of doubts in my mind about how much I should charge, how much other people's budgets were, clients who weren't giving budgets, things like that. And so I think my approach that I took essentially was I would price a project a little bit higher than I was comfortable with. I look back on what I charged in the first year, and it was so little that, yeah, that's a whole thing. But at the time, it was what I was comfortable with, and it was what I felt was fair. And so my approach to that was I would price something, I would do the best work I possibly could, and then the next project that I did, I would price it higher than that. And it was really, honestly, just little steps. Every single project that I took on a lot of projects, so that was part of it, was once I had done a project at, say, $3,000, I was like, okay, well, I can probably charge $5,000 for that. And then slightly more and slightly more and slightly more, to the point where my pricing now, I feel like is at a really high level that I feel really proud of. But I still get comments sometimes that I'm not charging enough. And so it's like this constant battle. But I really think time is the biggest thing. I saw a lot of conversations and just like advice when I was early in freelance that, and a lot of times it came from like male influencers, that like you should never leave money on the table, and you should be doubling your prices with every project, and you need to be charging more and things like that. And a lot of that advice, I think, came from a good place, but it's hard to do. And I think you should never feel bad, especially when you're starting freelance, about leaving money on the table, because you are charging what you think is fair, and you do really good work, and then you charge more next time. And then eventually you get to a level where you feel confident in your pricing, and you know that you can execute on that. Another big thing, I think, is asking peers in your industry what they think of quotes that you're sending out, what they would charge for similar work, things like that. I think that if you are in a vacuum or a bubble of what you're charging, and you're just sending out quotes, you're not asking for feedback from anyone who's not your client, obviously, that can be quite challenging. So I think people are more open to talk about pricing than you would think, especially if it's like a private conversation that you're having with someone who might seem like a competitor, but frankly, within the Webflow community, I feel like nobody really sees one another as like a true competitor. I think a lot of it is like, I'll help you and you help me, and we're all gonna like have enough work. But yeah, I would reach out to someone and say, like, you know, I really respect your pricing or what you're doing. I'm sending out a quote for this thing. What do you think about this rate, or how I'm structuring this quote? And I think a lot of people would be really willing to get feedback if it's someone you trust.
That's really good advice. And finding like one of those communities and finding someone within that community that you can talk to directly. For me, it's Jeremy and Penny. We do kind of bounce ideas and talk about pricing very openly. And that is extremely helpful. Or find someone who's got the same type of projects that you do, and just start talking. It's so helpful.
Yeah. When I first started freelancing, I talked to a friend who someone had done this for her, and they said, you know, like, you need to be charging at least this much per hour. When you're sending out quotes, if you have any questions about them, send them to me. And I think that she offered that to me, and that was like such a powerful thing to have a friend who was doing the same type of work as me and who knew what I should be charging to help give me feedback on things.
Yeah. And another thing I wanted to talk about is that you're also at the point where you can choose the clients you want to work with and the type of projects you want to work on. How do you make those decisions? How do you decide this project and not that one? And how do you nicely turn down the ones that you don't want to work with?
Yeah, it's really hard, and it's such a fortunate problem to have, to be able to choose the work that you're taking on. It's partly by design, because I'm one person and I choose to stay small. I only have so much capacity, so I am in a spot where my capacity is limited, and I am very visible, so I get quite a few inquiries, and I can pick and choose which ones I want to work on. How I choose the work that I do has kind of come about over time. I think time is like the biggest, learning benefit here, is just that I've been doing this a while now. I think when I first started out, I took a course and it was like, you need to pick a niche. You need to find an industry that you want to work with and only work with that industry. And at the time when I was first starting freelancing, I was thinking to myself, like, I don't want to just work with one industry or one person. And so I think that advice was really challenging when I first started, because I kept thinking, oh, well, I'm doing all these different things. Like, how is that going to form a thread of the work that I take on? And you learn when you do projects what you like and what you don't like. And so I think that was really helpful, to just take on lots of different types of projects and different types of websites. And as I completed them or was in the process of them, I realized what type of clients I wanted to work with, what type of personalities I enjoyed, what type of functionality I wanted to execute on. And so it really was kind of like the first year and a half of me just like doing lots of different things, where I started to realize, okay, this is the type of project I like doing. This is the type of personality I like doing or working with. These are the industries that I don't want to work with. And that kind of formed through elimination the type of projects that I like to do. So right now, like, all of that learning has come to the focus that I have right now, which is marketing sites between 8 to 12 pages. And I love working with clients who have either just done a rebrand or a refresh, or I'm working directly with a brand agency or studio as part of the refresh and rebrand that they're doing.
Yeah, and that's actually, I wanted to talk to you about that as well, is because you've been saying that you're doing a lot of collaboration work lately. And how do you start those collaborations? How do you find someone that you're going to collaborate with? If it's, let's say, a designer, how do you vet them? How does that process work?
Yeah, it kind of came about organically. I think I worked with a few clients last year that were brand studios. And it was really a shift. So my first year of freelancing, I wanted to work totally on my own. I didn't collaborate with anybody, because I was trying to build up my portfolio of work that I could say was fully me. And so the first year I was freelancing, I was like, I just want to do stuff myself. I had declined a lot of development only work, because I wanted to do design and development that I could show was my full skill set. But once I had kind of like a library of projects that were design and development and could show my skill set, I started to think about like taking on more development only work and how I could collaborate with other designers. Because at that point I was starting to like realize how much I missed working in a studio and that critique and just like back and forth. And that was really nice. I think some of my first collaborations came about just with like local industry connections, because I had worked as a designer in a studio for 3 years, and I was involved with the GDC, the Graphic Designers of Canada. I knew people who were other designers, other studios, who were looking for web design work, or someone to help them with web design and Webflow. Part of that was also that like I couldn't shut up about Webflow and I still can't. Like basically, I graduated university, and every single person that I met who was a designer, I was saying, "Have you heard about Webflow?" And so a lot of my industry connections knew that I used Webflow. And when they got a request from a client to use Webflow, they would reach out to me. So that was kind of like the beginning of some of those collaborations, were clients who were looking, like industry clients, agencies and brand studios who were looking for someone to do Webflow, and they knew that I did it. So I got to work with them. And then once I did work with them, I realized how much I loved working with those kind of arrangements of having a studio or an agency do a really wonderful, well thought out strategic brand. Mm-hmm. And then I could take those building blocks and use it to design and develop a website. And it kind of combined all of the things I really loved of having a really strong brand to build from. Mm-hmm. And then I could just focus on web design and development and do a really good job on that front.
So it's more an agency with a brand that's already built will come to you, or do you ever have a client that's looking for branding and web design and you find the designer to do the branding?
It's usually the first. I don't tend to find designers to work with myself. Usually it's kind of like an organic relationship of someone has contacted them about a brand and then they need to help them find a web designer and web developer. So I've started to like reach out to more brand designers to say like, I'd really love to work with a brand that you've built. And that's brought out some good relationships and things like that. But usually it's brand designers who have a client who needs a website.
Where, out of curiosity, where do you reach out to them on those brand designers? Where do you find them?
Honestly, mostly it's just been Twitter. I put out a tweet a while ago, basically saying like, I want most of my 2023 projects to be in collaboration with brand designers. And then I met some really great brand designers through that. I had also like been meeting brand designers prior to that, just with like Twitter in general and people knowing like the work that I did. Mm-hmm. And it was just kind of like something where I realized how much I liked doing that work. Then I was like, oh, I should probably seek out more of this.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I'm gonna start. I would actually love to start collaborating more with brand designers and do that as well. So it's good advice. And now I kind of wanted to talk a little bit as well because it's a subject that you talk about a lot in different interviews about work-life balance. And I feel like from an outsider perspective, it seems like you have a really good work-life balance, that you've probably worked hard. I'm sure it didn't start out that way, and you worked hard at getting to this point. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about work-life balance.
And I'm so glad that that's the image that I portray externally, because it's what I strive for internally, but don't always feel like that. Yeah, honestly, like I think the first year that I freelanced, I had no work-life balance. I worked so much. I was constantly working. I was really overwhelmed by work and cried a lot. I don't know if that's like part of freelancing, but there was a lot of tears in the first year that I freelanced. And I started to realize like, this is unsustainable for me to feel like this. It was really probably like just before my second year freelance anniversary where I was like, I need to make a change in how I'm approaching work, because all I do is work. I was working like 6 or 7 days a week. And feeling really overwhelmed, and like I didn't have to be doing that. Like I had enough work. Like it wasn't like I was like stressing about not having enough work. It was I had too much work because I was saying yes to everything, and I really wanted to be doing it. Like there's so many things that you can do a good job on and that you can help people with. And I was starting to realize like you don't have to say yes to everything. You can curate the type of work that you want to do. And that I maybe needed to do a little bit of work on myself to feel better about the balance that I was having with work. And I think the biggest change that I've made that I think has had the most impact on my work and my personal life is I started talking to a counselor. And that impetus was that like I was crying a lot about work because I was really stressed out about it. And I was feeling just like overwhelmed with both the volume of work that I was doing, but also I was having some tense relationships at that time with clients, and I was trying to navigate those. And I was like, I need some support here. So really starting to talk to a counselor about why I was taking on so much work, how I could take on less work and be more thoughtful about the clients that I was working with, really changed like my whole relationship with freelancing. Was having her help me realize that I don't have to say yes to everything. I don't have to be everything to everyone. I can choose work in a selfish way that is work that I want to do, that is also of benefit to my clients. Like it's not just a one-sided thing, but I can do work that's really helpful for someone else that I also really enjoy. And I don't have to take on work that I don't want to do. And that was like a massive realization that I think has really transformed how I approach the work that I take on, and how I feel about work. I don't cry about work anymore because that's not.
I was gonna say, with everything you have on the go, like between your clients and promoting yourself and the different collaborations, like did you ever get close to a burnout? Did you ever burn out, or you been able to prevent that so far?
Yeah, I don't think it was like, I feel like when people talk about burnout, it's often like a larger thing that they really need to like recover from and take like a really big chunk of time off. And I think I experienced like little moments of burnout, but never that full, like, oh my God, I never want to do this again.
Yeah.
It was more so like little bits of just being really overwhelmed for a couple weeks, and then things would improve or things like that. But I also think at the root of it, like I really love working. I really love what I do. And so even when I am overwhelmed, like I still really enjoy the work that I'm doing, and my clients are phenomenal. And so that just like is a really grounding thing for me, that even when the volume is a lot, I'm doing work that I really enjoy for people who I really enjoy working with.
Yeah. I feel like it's hard to say no sometimes, because some of the projects that come at you seem so interesting that you just want to do them all. And that part I find hard, like figuring out what to say no to and how to say it as well, and not put yourself in a position of being burnt out.
Yeah, I think for me, like a lot of those no thank you conversations switched when I started reframing how like why I was saying no. I think for a long time I was like, oh, well, if I say no, I'm disappointing someone, or they're not going to be happy with me, or whatever else. And I started to frame it as, if I'm not excited about this work, there's probably someone else out there who is excited about it and is going to do a good job of it. And if that's not me, then that's okay. A client deserves to work with someone who is excited about their work and is going to be an enthusiastic partner. And if that's not me, that's okay. And so really a lot of like how I pick projects is sometimes just based on a gut feeling of whether or not I'm interested in the product that they have, or their team, or things like that. Other times it's like a specific industry that I'll either really want to work with or not want to work with. And so a lot of those kind of yes and no's are like, frankly, just like a gut feeling. I also really like talking to people. So I'll jump on a call with the potential client and see like how our personal chemistry is and how I would enjoy working with this person, what their goals are, if I feel like I can help them achieve those goals. And sometimes like functionality things are an automatic no for me. For things like if they really want to do like e-commerce or like complex CMS setup, just things that like I'm not really that interested in, those are kind of like an automatic no for me as well. But saying no, like your point, how you actually turn down those projects, I have I often struggle with that. And so I have some like scripts that I have written out of when I'll say no to things or how to say no, and how I can help them find someone else for the project.
Yeah. And so another thing that you talk about as well in your keynote was the support system that you have. I was wondering, could you tell us a bit more about that as well?
Yeah, I think that was part of when I started counseling, the realization that I had that I can ask for help with things. And so, yeah, really focusing on asking for help with things that I need help with, but also taking care of myself. So I think in the keynote, I talked about like physical, emotional, and then like necessities of things that are my supports that help me be strong. And if some of them are weak, then that's okay. But if all of them are weak, then I'm personally probably not going to be strong as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think I'm really focused on taking care of myself, because I know that if I don't take care of myself, then I'm not going to be mentally and physically on top of my game for work and for my personal life too. But for me, what that looks like is I'm recovering from COVID right now, so I'm trying not to work out, but like running and being physically active, that is both helps me to like know that I can do hard things, but also it's just like a really nice mental break. Emotional support, like talking to my counselor when I have things come up both in work and personal life that are either stressful or feel tense, and I can work through those things and feel confident in how I'm handling them. And then like necessities, like I asked for more help from my partner at home. My parents watched my keynote and they were like, what about us? And I would be like remiss if I didn't talk about like how much support my parents give me, from both like an emotional and like logistics standpoint. Like my parents live 10 minutes away from me. They are so supportive, both emotionally of like what I do. Like they're very encouraging, they're very proud of me, and that feels really wonderful. But also like help around the house with things. Like my parents, we bought our house a few years ago and it needed a lot of renovations to it, and we did them all ourselves, but like my parents did a lot of it, and they like, my mom loves the project and she will just lead on anything. And so having their support and their guidance for like so many different aspects of my life is just massive. So I think they'll appreciate that, because I didn't mention it in my Webflow talk, but it is just like a really massive thing. And I know how lucky I am to be able to have them so close and so nearby when I need support for things.
Yeah, it's so important. It's really lucky. I mean, I know sometimes you talk about starting a family as well, and I just had a baby, and I thought I was going to take some time off and do a real mat leave, and I'm not. I can't say no to projects, and partly because they're fun, so I want to keep working, but I don't. My parents live on another continent, so I don't have that support, and yeah, it's difficult without the right support. I do have good support though. My partner's actually taken the day off to let me do this interview, but it makes a big difference in your mental health and physical health if you're able to have that kind of support, for sure.
Yeah, I am so unbelievably lucky to have a supportive partner, supportive parents, supportive community, who are really on board with what I'm doing, are on board with how much I want to work, and are proud of me, because I think that gives you so much energy when your community and the people that you love are supportive of you. And I think that's like a massive reason for why I love work and I feel successful at work, is because of the people around me who give me love and support.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask you what's coming up in the next few years, but we're running out of time, and I want to make sure
I feel like I could talk forever.
I know. And I want to make sure that we have time for some questions from the audience, and bring back Jeremy and Penny for those questions. So yeah, Penny or Jeremy, do you want to take some of the questions?
Sure, I'll jump in. So we have a question from Content Nest. Does it affect you how websites perform after you finish work for your clients? For instance, only 30% of websites from your portfolio get any monthly visitors. How do you feel about ROI for the clients?
Yeah, I think this is something that I'm really focused on when I'm first talking to clients about what does success look like for them in a project. For some clients, that's going to be, I want to increase the number of visitors to my website. And for others, it's really just a validation tool. Like they're not focused on driving traffic to their website. They're focused on when someone meets with them, they go to their website and their reputation is validated through what we've put up. It's incredibly important to me to build performative websites. And so part of that is understanding their goals. I sometimes will do SEO keyword research to figure out what they want to be ranking for and how we can optimize the site for that. And so that really informs the site structure, the site map, the pages that we're building to make sure that they are going to be ranked and are going to perform well. I do stay on sometimes to like monitor traffic and optimize sites and things like that. But largely I try to empower clients to manage that themselves, which is really easy with Webflow. And then if things do come up in the future where they're like, oh, this page isn't getting very much traffic, or how could we increase our reach? Sometimes it's a conversation of connecting them with a digital marketing firm or figuring out how we can maybe optimize some of their pages, add a blog, some more content. But yeah, there's a number of ways to approach it. And I think it's really important to me that a client feels like their site is successful, whatever metric they're measuring that against.
I think this was a wonderful comments. Just a comment for Grace. Thank you so much for sharing your story so authentically. Always appreciate someone who gives back to the community they're part of. So inspiring. And I have to second that. Like the honesty and the things you shared today, the authenticity was, I mean, it was really nice. So thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that. And thank you for Rachel for that comment. I think a lot of times I treat the Webflow community online like my coworkers. And I mean, I don't know that every coworker should talk about how much they cry at work, but that's what we did it anyways, it's fine. But yeah, I think that the Webflow community has been such a support for me working independently, where I can reach out to people, that it feels nice to be able to talk openly about what that actually looks like and maybe help other people feel less alone.
So you have a very specific design aesthetic, particularly about your home, and you lovingly share the photos of your home, but not everybody agrees with your design aesthetic. So Keith says, how do you feel about people telling you to add more to your home when you share pictures on social media?
This is so funny. I have like a little private collage of comments that I get on Twitter of people telling me that I need more plants or artwork in my house, which is so funny. But yeah, I live in like a very minimal space. Like you can tell from my back, like I don't have a lot in my house. And that's very intentional, both from like a functional standpoint, but also I'm on a screen looking at a lot of stuff every day. My work is quite colorful, even though like my personal aesthetic is not. And so like I'm looking at references and web design and like moving things and interactions and animations all day long. And when I am done work, I don't want to look at anything. And so it's like very intentional how quiet my space is, because when I'm done work, I want to be in a space that feels just like quiet and calming. And some people feel like that's incredibly cold and not like a warm spirit, and that is totally fine, and they don't have to live here. Yeah.
I have a question because we sometimes refer to you as the rare unicorn that does like design and development, right? But I found it really interesting that you, when you were like talking about, like, you know exactly what type of projects you do and don't want to do. Like you talked about, like if there's complex CMS stuff, you just don't really want to get into that. Does that like, So things that like, so what are those, I guess, are there kind of things that you like are like, I'm concentrating on this, and I don't actually have time for like, learning all these other things that go along with it. So how do you just not take those projects, or do you like work with other people that do some of that stuff, or what's your approach?
Yeah, I think when projects come in that are outside of my skill set or interest or both, usually I'm just passing those along to someone who I know will do a good job of them. I think it's a fine balance because with every project that I do, I want to inject something into it that I don't know how to do. So whether that's like a new type of functionality or new interactions or something that's just like a little bit out of my skill set, I want to make sure every project that I'm doing has an aspect of that. But if the entire project is that, then I personally don't feel confident going into that, knowing that I can like 10 out of 10, knock it out of the park, do an amazing job that they're going to be happy with. And so that's just like kind of where my comfort level lies, that I want to know that I'm going to deliver really excellent work. And then adding in like new skills in smaller ways. So I think the complex CMS thing is more so like Airtable connections and Zapier and like building product or websites that are more of a product. It's just like, I'm not really interested in it. Yeah. So like, that's kind of part of it, but I will do it when it's like, I know how to do it. And like, I will do it when it's like a small thing for a client that they need or something like that. But,
and are there specific skills that you're looking to learn in 2023 maybe, or?
Yes. So next year, I really want to focus on, and I've started to do this more robust interactions. That's something that I've like always not been wonderful at. So I'm doing a project right now where it's a development only project. And I basically told my client, go out and find whatever interactions that you want and we'll do them. Which I shot myself a little bit in the foot there, but I've compromised on a few of them saying, like that wasn't possible for XYZ reasons. Here's something that I'm going to suggest in its place. But I've purposely put myself in a position to learn how to do that. But using things like, oh gosh, what's that tool? I used it to animate a logo recently.
JSAP?
No. It's like a web-based animation
tool.
I
saw that on your Twitter. Yeah, I
can never remember what it's called. Yeah. If anybody knows what I'm talking about,
was it Fable?
Fable, yes, Fable.
Right.
So I used Fable, and I would like to use it again and learn how to more so do that. And I also would like to play with Framer, which is another like web design tool, because I've seen so much about it recently. I had someone reach out to me about it actually, and they were wondering what I thought about Framer, and I haven't had a chance to use it. And so I really want to carve out some time to figure out what it's about. I asked some people at the Webflow who work at Webflow actually like what they thought of Framer, and it was like nothing but enthusiasm and like excitement for what they're doing. So I think I saw a tweet actually this morning from someone at Webflow who was saying like, nothing is going to like overtake another tool. Like there is so much room in this space for multiple tools. And so I've primarily been focused on Webflow, and I'd really like to see like what else is out there just for comparison.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd love to get
well over time here, unfortunately. We could seriously go on for so much longer.
I think we have enough questions to continue for another hour.
Yeah, exactly. But
if there are any questions that anybody has that we didn't get to, like feel free to ask me on Twitter or in a DM or whatever, and I'll try and answer.
So that's perfect, because we were about to ask you how people can find you online. So that's perfect segue for that.
Yeah, I'm primarily on Twitter, Grace on Grid. You can find me there. My website, gracewalker.ca, was a experiment that I have yet to redo. So go take a look at that too. But yeah, I'm mostly on Twitter.
Great. And that experiment really got a lot of attention. I think a lot of people were just fascinated by the idea of using Twitter to create a website.
Yeah, I was really surprised by how many people resonated with that, but it got me quite a few inquiries, so I was happy with it.
Excellent. All right, good. So that brings us to the end of our 5th Northern Showcase. We'd like to thank you all for joining us and remind you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Visit our website at nocodenorth.webflow.io and sign up for our mailing list to receive all of our latest updates. Follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And join us on Fridays in the Lodge, our cool gather space, and sign up for our holiday celebration organized in collaboration with the Floxies. The details are on our Twitter feed. And until next time, bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much, Grace.
Thank you, Grace.